My golden boy brother sabotaged my startup, so I cut off my toxic family forever, and built a company they all now beg to join and atone. I ditched my toxic family for good, and let me tell you why. My younger brother Matt has been a thorn in my side for as long as I can remember. I'm 33 now and he's 30, but no matter how old we get, he's always been a problem. I'm not just saying this in a casual, siblings fight sometimes kind of way. I really hate the guy, always have, and I think I've got some pretty solid reasons for feeling that way. Let me give you some background. Growing up, our parents treated Matt like he was the second coming of royalty. They made it painfully clear he was their favorite, their golden boy. They didn't even try to hide it. Me? I was just the extra, the guy they tolerated but never really cared about. No matter what I did, I was never good enough. Meanwhile, Matt could do the bare minimum, sometimes not even that, and get praised like he'd just cured cancer or something. I get it, some parents have favorites. But this wasn't just favoritism, it was full-blown worship. To make matters worse, we come from a traditional, old-school family. Our parents are immigrants, and in their culture, the son is basically treated like a king. It doesn't matter if he's a screw-up, if he's a guy, he's automatically more important. Growing up, that was drilled into me every single day. Matt could have burned down the house, and my parents would have said, "Oh, he's just expressing himself." I, on the other hand, couldn't do anything right, ever. It wasn't always like this, though. When we were younger, I tried to make things work with him. I tried to be the good older brother, but as we got older, Matt became more and more of a jerk. He knew he was the favorite, and man, did he lean into it hard. The guy thrived on being the center of attention. He'd constantly overshadow me, no matter what I achieved. And I achieved a lot. I was always the one working hard in school, getting good grades, earning my degree, while Matt coasted by, partying and barely passing classes. But guess who got all the praise? Yep, not me. One example that's burned into my brain is my 18th birthday. It was supposed to be a big deal, right? I had a bunch of friends over, my family was there, and it was meant to be a fun time. But then, right in the middle of the party, Matt decides it's the perfect moment to announce that he's dating some college senior and plans to drop out of high school to go live with her. I don't know if you've ever witnessed a full-blown family meltdown, but that's exactly what happened. My parents freaked out, our relatives freaked out, and suddenly, my birthday didn't matter at all. Everything became about Matt's big decision. To top it all off, the whole thing turned out to be a lie. He was just doing it for attention, just to ruin my moment. I should have seen it coming, honestly. That's just who Matt is. Everything has to be about him, all the time. The worst part? My parents fed into it. They didn't even try to punish him for ruining my birthday. Nope, they just coddled him, like usual. It was always like that. Fast forward a few years. I'm out of the house, got into business school, graduated with honors, and started working a decent paying job. Meanwhile, Matt barely graduated high school, partied his way through his 20s, and was still mooching off our parents. He did a couple of odd jobs here and there, but nothing serious. Despite all that, my parents acted like he was some sort of business prodigy. They even went as far as throwing him a huge going-away party when he pretended to move out for college. When I left for school, my parents threw a small dinner with like 5 people. But for Matt, they rented out a restaurant and invited everyone they knew. Typical, right? Anyway, I didn't let it bother me too much back then. I figured once I was out on my own, I wouldn't have to deal with the constant comparisons and blatant favoritism anymore. For a while, I didn't. I worked hard, saved up money, and finally came up with an idea for my own business. I spent months working on the plan with my business partner, Eric. We put together a killer proposal, and I thought, okay, maybe this is my shot. Maybe I can actually make something of myself without relying on anyone else. But here's where things go off the rails. After months of work, I figured I'd pitch the idea to my parents. My dad was always decent in business, and I thought, hey, maybe they'll want to invest, maybe they'll actually support me this time. I didn't have high hopes, but it was worth a shot, right? To my surprise, they were into it. They said they'd invest and help me get things going. I was over the moon. It felt like, for the first time in my life, they were actually backing me. But then Matt happened. I don't know what kind of twisted satisfaction he gets from screwing me over, but he convinced my parents that investing in my business was a bad idea. He told them it was too risky, that I didn't have what it takes to succeed, and that they should pull out before they lost any money. The worst part? They listened to him. Just like that, all the promises they made, the money they said they'd invest, it was all gone. This wasn't just casual talk. This was after I'd quit my job, after Eric and I had put everything on the line. I remember sitting in their living room trying to process what they were telling me. My dad just looked at me and said, "We've reconsidered. Matt thinks this isn't a good idea." That was it. No discussion, no warning, just blindsided me with it. I was furious. I mean, here I was, ready to start something that could have been huge, and they pulled the rug out from under me because my idiot brother had a bad feeling about it. I don't think I've ever been that angry in my life. I told them exactly what I thought of them, of Matt, of everything. I stormed out of the house and didn't look back. From that moment on, I was done with them. I couldn't believe that, after everything I'd worked for, they'd still side with Matt. It wasn't just about the money, it was about them never believing in me, never seeing me as more than second best. That was it. I cut them off completely. I didn't need their support, and I sure as hell didn't need Matt sabotaging everything I worked for. Looking back, it was probably the best decision I ever made. So after that whole disaster with Matt and my parents pulling out of my business deal, I was wrecked, seriously. I had no idea what to do next. I had already quit my job, and there was no going back to that. My business partner Eric was freaking out too, but he's the type of guy who tries to keep it together, you know? He just kept saying stuff like, "We'll figure it out, man," even though I could tell he wasn't really sure how we were going to do that. Honestly, at that moment, I just felt completely screwed. I spent the next few days sitting at home, going through everything in my head, trying to piece together how I got myself into this mess. It wasn't like I hadn't put in the work. I mean, I spent months building this business plan from the ground up, and it was solid. I had proof of concept, a detailed financial model, even a couple of smaller investors who were ready to chip in. But my parents were supposed to be the big piece, the ones who'd give us the boost we needed to get off the ground. And now? Now it was gone, all because Matt said I was going to fail. I kept replaying that conversation in my head, like, how could they just drop everything without even telling me why until I forced it out of them? I guess that's just how deep their blind trust in Matt goes. They believed him over me, again. That realization stung the most, like I was never going to be seen as capable or even equal to him in their eyes. But I couldn't stay in that mindset forever. Eric and I had to regroup fast. We started talking about next steps. The first thing we needed to figure out was whether we could salvage any of the investors we had lined up. The smaller ones, who were willing to take a risk on us, but weren't going to be able to give us nearly as much as my parents would have. So we sat down and started making calls. Let me tell you, cold calling potential investors when you've just had your biggest financial backing fall through is not fun. It was basically a marathon of sorry we can't help and maybe next time. The first few calls were brutal, and I could feel my hope draining with each rejection. But then, one day, we got a call back from this small firm we'd pitched to a while back. They weren't offering anything huge, but it was something. It was enough to keep us from completely sinking, and at that point, that's all I needed. Eric and I jumped at the opportunity. We reworked our entire budget, cut costs, and decided we'd go lean until we could prove the business could stand on its own. It wasn't what we planned, but it was better than nothing. So we kept grinding, putting in long hours, trying to make sure every penny was accounted for. Those first few months were absolute hell. There were moments when I thought we were done for, like the entire business was going to crash and burn before we even got started. I couldn't sleep. I'd stay up all night worrying about whether we'd made the right choice, if we should have just thrown in the towel and gone back to our old jobs. But the thought of giving up made me sick. I'd already lost my family's support. I wasn't going to lose this too. This was all I had left. So, Eric and I pushed through, running on fumes, trying to make it work. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. We had to cut back on so many things we thought we needed. At one point, we were literally working out of a friend's basement because we couldn't afford office space anymore. But I wasn't complaining. We were still moving forward, even if it was slower than we expected. A few months in, something crazy happened. We got our first big client. I'm talking huge. We had been networking like crazy, trying to make connections with anyone who would hear us out, and somehow it paid off. This client saw potential in what we were doing and decided to take a chance on us. It wasn't just a lifeline, it was the break we needed. The money started coming in, slowly at first, but it was enough to get us out of survival mode. We started building momentum, and for the first time since this whole mess began, I actually felt like maybe, just maybe, we were going to make it. But of course, things couldn't stay smooth for long, right? When we were starting to hit our stride, guess who comes crawling back into the picture? Yep, Matt. One day, out of nowhere, I get a text from him. It was weird because we hadn't spoken since I blew up at our parents. The text just said, "Hey, can we talk?" Like, really talk? After everything that happened, I almost didn't respond, but curiosity got the better of me. So, I texted back about what? He calls me and I pick up, half expecting some apology or explanation. But nope. Turns out Matt had his own little disaster brewing. He didn't say much at first, just danced around the topic, but eventually, he let it slip that he was in deep trouble with his own finances. Apparently, he had made some bad investments, big shocker there, and was up to his neck in debt. And now, he wanted my help. I couldn't believe the nerve of this guy. After he'd sabotaged my business, after he convinced my parents to screw me over, now he wanted me to bail him out? I was floored. I mean, what did he expect me to say? Sure bro, let me help you out after you ruined my life? Yeah, no, I flat out told him that wasn't happening. I wasn't his safety net, and if he was in trouble, that was on him. He tried to argue, saying that we were brothers and that we should help each other out. I just laughed and hung up. There was no way in hell I was falling for that. After that call, I felt this weird sense of relief. Like, finally, I was done with all of them. I wasn't tied to my family anymore, wasn't caught up in their drama. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I'd survived without them, and now I didn't need them for anything. Eric and I kept growing the business. We hired a few employees, moved into a proper office, and started expanding. It was hard, but it was also the most rewarding thing I'd ever done. Every time I looked at how far we'd come, I knew it was because I didn't let Matt or my parents drag me down. I was free, finally, and it felt damn good. #1 Update 1. Let me tell you about the time my parents and Matt came crawling back into my life. By this point, I hadn't spoken to any of them in almost 3 years after the whole business sabotage thing. I cut them off completely, and honestly, it felt great. I didn't need their negativity, and I was doing just fine on my own. My business was starting to take off. Eric and I were getting new clients, and I was finally starting to feel like all the hard work was paying off. Life was pretty good. Then, one Sunday afternoon, I'm just chilling at home, thinking it's going to be a quiet day. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was kind of confused. I opened the door, and guess who's standing there? My parents. I kid you not, it was like seeing ghosts. I hadn't heard from them since that last argument where I told them to basically get lost, and now here they were, standing on my doorstep like nothing had happened. At first, I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, staring at them, waiting for one of them to say something. My dad finally broke the silence, giving me this awkward smile and saying, "Can we come in?" Honestly, I didn't even want to let them in, but curiosity got the better of me. So, I stepped aside and let them into my apartment. We sat down in the living room, and I was still waiting for some kind of explanation, maybe even an apology. But no, instead, they started making small talk, asking me how I've been, how the business is going, all that fake "we care about you" stuff. I wasn't buying it. I knew they had to have some kind of agenda because there's no way they just showed up out of the blue, after all this time to see how I was doing. After what felt like forever, my dad finally got to the point. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We've been hearing about your success. Your business, it's doing well, isn't it?" The moment those words left his mouth, I knew exactly where this was going. I just nodded, staying silent because I wanted to see how far they'd take this. My mom jumped in next, saying, "We've been thinking, now that things are going so well for you, maybe it's time for us to be involved. We could invest, help you grow even bigger." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the same people who had pulled out at the last minute and nearly tanked my entire business, and now that they saw I was making it work, they wanted back in? I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but I kept my cool. I looked at them and said, "You want to invest in my business now, after you bailed on me when I needed you the most?" My dad tried to explain it away, saying something like, "Well, we weren't sure back then, but now we can see you've proven yourself," as if that was supposed to make everything okay. I wasn't having any of it. I told them flat out that I didn't need their money, and that I wasn't interested in their support. I reminded them how they left me high and dry when I was desperate for help, and now that I was succeeding without them, they wanted to ride the wave. The more I talked, the more uncomfortable they got. My mom started tearing up, saying, "But we're your parents, we just want to be a part of your success." I wasn't falling for that guilt trip. I could see right through it. They didn't care about me or my success. They cared about being associated with it. They wanted the bragging rights, the chance to tell everyone that they had a hand in building something great, even though they had nothing to do with it. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I told them they could leave, and that I had nothing more to say. My dad, looking frustrated, tried one last time to convince me. He said, "You don't understand. We're family. You're supposed to let us help." That's when I lost it. I snapped and said, "You weren't family when you bailed on me, so don't pull the family card now." I told them that they had made their choice years ago, and now they had to live with it. They weren't getting a second chance to screw me over. At that point, my mom was full-on crying, saying things like, "I always knew this would happen. College changed you. You're too independent now." She said they never should have let me go to school, that if I had stayed home I would have known my place and wouldn't be acting so ungrateful. I just stood there, speechless for a second. It was like everything she said confirmed what I'd always known. My success wasn't what they cared about, what they really wanted was control. If I had failed, I would have been dependent on them, and that's what they wanted. They couldn't stand the idea that I had done it without them. I told them to leave one last time, and this time, my dad finally got the message. He stood up, pulling my mom up with him, and they left without another word. As soon as the door shut behind them, I felt this weird mix of relief and anger. I was glad they were gone, but part of me couldn't believe how blind they were to what they'd done. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? But no. Matt had to get involved. A couple of hours later, I got a call from an unknown number. I knew who it was before I even picked up. It was Matt. He started going off immediately, accusing me of disrespecting our parents, and saying that I owed them an apology. He was talking like I had committed some crime, telling me that I needed to make things right with them because they raised me and that I wouldn't be where I am without them. I couldn't help but laugh. I told him straight up that I didn't owe them anything, least of all an apology. I reminded him of how he sabotaged me, how he convinced them to pull their investment, and how I had made it without any help from them. He didn't have much to say after that, just a bunch of weak excuses about how he never meant to hurt me and that family should stick together. I hung up. I didn't need to hear any more of his nonsense. I was done with all of them. They made their choices, and I made mine. After that day, I blocked all their numbers. I didn't want to give them another chance to weasel their way back into my life. Honestly, I've never looked back. I built something on my own without them, and I wasn't about to let them take any credit for it. That's the thing with family, they think they can mess with you, but when you finally stand up for yourself, they act like you're the problem. Well, not anymore. I'm done with them, and I'm better off for it. #update 2. After that last stunt with my parents showing up at my place, I thought things would calm down. I figured after I told them to get lost, they'd finally take the hint and leave me alone. But man, I was wrong. Turns out the story wasn't quite over yet, and it was Matt who came crashing down this time. A few weeks went by, and everything was pretty quiet. The business was going well. Eric and I were busy with new clients, and honestly, life was good. I hadn't heard a word from my parents or Matt since I blocked them, and it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. No drama, no guilt trips, nothing, just peace. But of course peace doesn't last long when you've got a brother like Matt. One day, out of the blue, sorry, I know I said that already, I got a call from a mutual friend, Jake. Now Jake's not really in my close circle or anything, but he's one of those guys who keeps in touch with everyone. He's the type who knows what's going on in people's lives, whether you want him to or not. Anyway, he calls me up and says, "Hey man, did you hear what's going on with Matt?" My first thought was, why the hell would I care? But Jake's the kind of guy who can't keep anything to himself, so he starts spilling the details without me even asking. Turns out, Matt's life was going down the drain. And when I say down the drain, I mean fast. Apparently his whole business that he'd been bragging about to my parents for years? Yeah, that was a complete lie. He wasn't running anything. He'd been living off loans and handouts from my parents and, get this, racking up a massive amount of debt. I knew Matt wasn't exactly the most responsible guy, but even I didn't expect things to be this bad. According to Jake, he had made some really bad investment choices, surprise, surprise, and had lost most of the money he got from my parents. He had also borrowed a ton of cash from shady places, and now the whole thing was catching up with him. Debt collectors were knocking on his door, and he had no way to pay them back. I couldn't help but laugh when Jake told me all this. I mean, this was the same guy who had convinced my parents to pull out of my business because he thought I'd fail, and now look who's drowning in debt. Karma's a funny thing, huh? But here's the kicker. My parents had no idea how bad things were for Matt. He'd been hiding the whole mess from them, still pretending everything was fine. They were under the impression that he was some big-shot entrepreneur when, in reality, he was barely hanging on. I guess that's why he was so desperate to get involved in my business. He saw it as his way out. His way to cover up the disaster he'd created for himself. Anyway, after Jake filled me in, I just went on with my day. It wasn't my problem, and I wasn't about to get involved. Matt dug his own grave, and I wasn't going to be the one to pull him out of it. But of course, things didn't stay quiet for long. A couple of days later I got a frantic call from my mom. She was crying, which wasn't exactly a shocker at this point, but she was going on and on about how Matt was in trouble, how he was in over his head with money issues, and how they were losing everything because of him. I didn't say anything at first, just listened as she went on about how they had bailed Matt out of debt multiple times, and now they were struggling to keep up. My dad had even started dipping into their retirement savings to cover for Matt. They were about to lose their house because they'd taken out loans against it to keep Matt afloat. It was a complete financial nightmare. Then she hit me with it. She asked if I could help. Yep, after everything, after all the crap they put me through, my mom actually asked if I could help Matt. She didn't even try to sugarcoat it or make it about family. No, she straight up said, "We need money to help Matt out of this situation. I just sat there for a minute trying to wrap my head around the fact that she was even asking me this. I told her flat out that I wasn't giving them a single dime. I wasn't about to bail Matt out of his mess, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let them guilt trip me into it. I said, "You chose him over me every single time, now you can deal with it." My mom didn't take that well. She started crying harder, going on about how they were going to lose everything and how Matt didn't mean for things to get this bad. But I wasn't budging. I told her they made their choice when they backed Matt and screwed me over. Now they had to live with the consequences. After that call, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally understand where I was coming from. But nope. The next day, I got a text from my dad asking if I'd reconsider. He tried to hit me with a whole family helps family line, saying that Matt needed me and that we were all in this together. But I knew better. This wasn't about family, this was about them refusing to admit they'd been wrong about Matt. They were trying to clean up his mess, just like they always had, and now that they were sinking, they wanted me to jump in and save them. I didn't respond to the text. I didn't need to. They could keep digging that hole if they wanted to, but I wasn't about to jump in after them. A week later, I heard through the grapevine that Matt had to sell his car to pay off some of his debts. It wasn't enough to cover everything though, and now he was getting desperate. My parents were still trying to keep up appearances, pretending everything was fine to the rest of the family, but I knew it was just a matter of time before the whole thing collapsed. Honestly, I didn't feel bad for him, not one bit. Matt had spent his whole life coasting by, relying on everyone else to clean up his messes. He had sabotaged me, lied to our parents, and now he was paying the price. The last I heard, Matt was considering moving back in with my parents because he couldn't afford rent anymore. They were scrambling to keep their house, barely making ends meet because they were still bailing him out at every turn. It was honestly pathetic. But here's the thing, I'm not going to be the one who saves them. I've built my own life, my own success, and I've done it without their help. If they want to keep sinking money into Matt's bottomless pit, that's their choice, but they're not taking me down with them. And that, my friends, is what happens when you put all your faith in the wrong person. #update 3. After everything that went down with Matt and my parents, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? Like, surely they'd finally realize I wasn't going to swoop in and save them from their mess. But of course, that's not how things work in my family. I swear, every time I thought I'd cut ties for good, something would pull me right back into the chaos. A couple of months after I told my parents I wasn't helping them with Matt's financial disaster, I got a call from my Aunt Linda. Now, Aunt Linda's always been the one person in my family I actually liked. She was more down to earth, and never really bought into the whole Matt as a genius narrative my parents pushed. So when she called, I figured it might be something important. The first thing she said when I picked up was, "You might want to sit down for this," and that's never a good way to start a conversation, right? I wasn't sitting though, and I told her to just spit it out. That's when she hit me with it. "Your parents are selling their house." At first, I wasn't sure if I heard her right. Selling the house? The same house they had sworn they'd never leave, the one they'd spent years telling everyone would stay in the family forever? I asked her why, but deep down I already knew. Turns out things had gotten worse for Matt, like, way worse. He hadn't just racked up debt with some sketchy lenders, he was now being sued by one of the businesses he tried to partner with. My parents had no choice but to sell the house to cover the legal fees and whatever was left of his debts. I didn't even know what to say. I just sat there, listening to Aunt Linda lay out the whole mess. My parents were in total denial, apparently still convinced that Matt was just going through a rough patch, and that things would turn around for him. They were selling their house, their retirement savings were gone, and they still thought Matt would somehow get back on track. It was crazy. My parents had always been pretty stubborn, but this was next-level delusion. I mean, they were literally throwing away everything they had to save a guy who didn't care. The worst part? Matt wasn't even living with them anymore. He'd skipped town, probably to avoid all the people he owed money to. I asked Aunt Linda why she was telling me all this, like, what did she expect me to do about it? And that's when she dropped another bombshell. My parents had been telling the rest of the family that I was the one refusing to help them, that I was the selfish son who wouldn't lift a finger to save the family home. I felt my blood boil. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, minding my own business, staying out of their mess, and now they were dragging my name through the mud to cover for Matt's screw-ups. Aunt Linda said she didn't believe them, but apparently, a lot of the family did. I guess it was easier for my parents to paint me as the villain than to admit they'd screwed up by putting all their faith in Matt. After that call, I had to sit down and think about what to do next. Part of me just wanted to walk away and never deal with them again. But another part of me was pissed that they were smearing my name to cover up their own mistakes. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called my parents. I hadn't spoken to them since they asked for money months ago, but I needed to hear their side of the story. When my mom picked up, she sounded like she'd been crying. She didn't even say hello. The first thing out of her mouth was, "Are you calling to help?" I couldn't believe it. Even after everything, she still thought I might swoop in and save the day. I asked her straight up, "Are you telling the family that I refuse to help you save the house?" She hesitated. That told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't about to let her weasel her way out of this, so I pressed her harder. I told her I knew about the lies they'd been spreading, and that I wasn't going to sit back while they made me look like the bad guy. Finally, she broke down and admitted it. She said they didn't know what else to do, that they were desperate, and they thought if they made me look bad enough, maybe I'd feel guilty and step in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her there was no chance in hell I'd ever help them now, not after all the lies and manipulation. Then my dad got on the phone, and things got heated fast. He started yelling, saying that I had abandoned the family, and that Matt was still my brother no matter what. He said I owed it to them to help fix things because family sticks together. That was the last straw for me. I told him he made his choice years ago when he sided with Matt. I reminded him how they threw me under the bus to protect their golden child and how they'd been enabling Matt's failures for years. I told him they were only reaping what they'd sown, and that it wasn't my job to clean up their mess. My dad tried to argue, but I wasn't listening anymore. I told him this was the last time we'd ever speak, and that if they needed help, they could go ask Matt. After all, he was their favorite, right? I hung up before he could say anything else. I blocked both their numbers after that. I was done, for real this time. A couple of weeks later, Aunt Linda called me again. She said my parents sold the house and were moving into a small apartment. They had barely enough to cover their bills now, and Matt? He hadn't even bothered to show up. Last anyone heard, he was living with some friend in another city, still avoiding his problems. I guess that's what happens when you put all your faith in the wrong person. My parents lost everything trying to save Matt, and now they had nothing left. Meanwhile, I was building a life for myself. One they had no part in. And you know what? I didn't feel bad, not even a little. In the end, they made their choice, and so did I. And I'm finally at peace with that.